The first week on Kethra Prime passed quickly for Danny Clark. He spent most of his time exploring the palace grounds, asking questions, and trying to understand how everything worked. The other candidates thought he was wasting his time. They were wrong. The insectoid champion, whose name was Rex, trained for 18 hours every single day. Danny would see him in the meditation chambers when he woke up, and Rex would still be there when Danny went to sleep. The creature sat, perfectly still, his hard shell gleaming under the soft lights. His mind focused on some inner task that Danny could not understand. Garak, the reptilian warrior, took a different approach. He performed combat rituals from dawn until dusk. His movements were precise and powerful. Each strike meant to sharpen his mental focus. Danny watched him one afternoon and counted over 200 different fighting positions. Garak noticed Danny watching and growled something in his native language. It did not sound friendly. The other candidates had their own methods. Some chanted ancient songs. Some fasted for days at a time. Some covered themselves in special oils or performed strange dances. Everyone was doing something to prepare for the trial. Everyone except Danny walked through the palace gardens, admiring the strange flowers that grew in colors he had never seen before. He sat by the fountains and watched the water flow, upward instead of down, defying gravity through some technology he did not understand. He ate meals in the communal hall and tried foods that ranged from delicious to absolutely disgusting. And he read. He read everything he could find about the heart of Kethra. The palace library was enormous, filled with books and scrolls and holographic displays containing thousands of years of knowledge. Most of it was written in the Kethran language, but Danny had been given a translation device that converted the text into English. It was not perfect, and sometimes the translations made no sense, but it was enough. What Danny learned surprised him. The heart of Kethra was not just a spiritual artifact. It was a machine. A very old and very advanced machine, but still a machine. It operated on principles of energy and frequency, converting the bioelectrical signals of living beings into resonance patterns. The crystal structure amplified these patterns and either accepted or rejected them based on compatibility. Danny spent hours studying the diagrams. The energy pathways inside the crystal looked familiar to him. They reminded him of circuit boards, the kind he had worked with back on Earth. The flow of energy followed logical patterns. There was an input, a processing center, and an output. It was elegant and beautiful, but it was still engineering. One evening, Torin found Danny in the library, surrounded by floating holographic images of the heart. "You are still reading," Torin observed. He sounded concerned. "I am trying to understand how it works," Danny replied without looking up. He was focused on a particular diagram showing the resonance frequencies of the crystal. "These patterns here, they repeat in a cycle. Every 47 seconds, the frequency shifts slightly. Do you see that?" Torin looked at the diagram. He had seen it many times before, but he had never noticed what Danny was pointing at. "That is just the natural rhythm of the heart. It has always done that." "Right, but why?" Danny asked. "If the crystal is looking for resonance, why would it keep changing its frequency? That would make it harder for people to match." "The heart tests the worthiness of those who approach it," Torin explained. "It is meant to be difficult. Only those with pure spirits and strong wills can adapt to its changes." Danny shook his head slowly. "Or maybe the crystal is searching, like a radio scanning for stations. It keeps changing frequencies because it is trying to find someone who matches." Torin was quiet for a moment. "That is a very strange way to think about a sacred artifact. I am an engineer," Danny said. "I think about how things work. Back on Earth, I fixed machines for a living. Big ones, small ones, it did not matter. Every machine has a pattern. You just have to find it. The heart of Kethera is not a machine, Torin said firmly. It was blessed by our ancestors. It carries their wisdom and their power. Those two things are not opposite, Danny replied. Your ancestors could have been wise and powerful and also really good engineers. They built something amazing here. I just want to understand it. Torin did not know how to respond to that. He had been trained his whole life to think of the heart as something mystical and beyond understanding. The idea that it could be analyzed like a piece of equipment felt almost offensive. But something about Danny's calm confidence made him hesitate. The other candidates are worried about you, Torin said, changing the subject. Worried? Why? They think you are not taking the trial seriously. They say you walk around smiling and asking silly questions. Some of them are insulted that a human was even allowed to participate. Danny finally looked up from his research. Are you worried about me? Torin considered the question. I am. Confused by you. I have mentored many candidates over the years. They all approach the trial with fear or determination or desperate hope. You approach it like a puzzle to solve. That is because it is a puzzle, Danny said. A really interesting one. These frequency patterns are fascinating. Whoever designed this crystal was brilliant. They created a system that could connect with any type of consciousness, regardless of species. The only reason people fail is because they do not understand the matching protocol. The matching protocol? Danny pulled up another diagram. Look, when someone touches the heart, their bioelectrical field interacts with the crystal matrix. The heart reads their frequency and tries to find common ground. If the person fights against the crystal or tries to force their energy into it, the heart rejects them. But if they adjust their frequency to match the crystal's scanning pattern, he trailed off, his eyes widening slightly. Torin saw something change in the human's expression. It was the look of someone who had just solved a difficult problem. What is it? Torin asked. I think I know how to do it, Danny said quietly. It is about timing. The crystal cycles through frequencies every 47 seconds. If you enter the cycle at the right moment and let your bioelectrical field follow the pattern instead of fighting it, you should achieve resonance. That is not how the trial works, Torin protested. Candidates must prove their spiritual worth. They must demonstrate strength of will and purity of heart. Danny shrugged. Maybe that is what achieving resonance feels like from the inside. But from an engineering perspective, it's just about matching frequencies. The spiritual experience and the technical process could be the same thing. Torin stared at the human for a long time. Part of him wanted to dismiss Danny's theory as nonsense. The trial had worked the same way for 4,000 years. Millions of beings had attempted it. The rules were clear and unchanging. But another part of him wondered if Danny might be right. Word of Danny's strange behavior reached Queen Vesera that night. She sat in her private chambers, listening to the reports from her advisors. They told her about the human who did not train, who spent his days reading and asking questions, who treated the Sacred Heart like a piece of machinery. Is he mocking us? Vesera asked. Her voice was soft, but there was danger in it. We do not believe so, Your Eternity, one advisor replied. He seems genuinely curious. Naive, perhaps, but not disrespectful. Humans are known for their arrogance, another advisor added. They are a young species who think they understand everything. He will fail like all the others, and his failure will teach his people humility. Vesera considered this. She had ruled the Ketheran Empire for 300 years. She had seen countless candidates attempt the trial. Most failed for decades before achieving resonance. Some never achieved it at all. The idea that a human, a member of a species discovered only 10 years ago, could succeed where so many others had struggled was absurd. Let him continue, she decided. When he fails, it will be a valuable lesson. His embarrassment will remind the younger species of their place in the galaxy. The advisors bowed and left to carry out her wishes. But that night, alone in her chambers, Queen Vexera found herself thinking about the human. Something about his approach bothered her. Not because it was wrong, but because it was different. In 4,000 years, no one had ever approached the trial the way Danny Clark was approaching it. She told herself it did not matter. He would fail. They all failed. But a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a question she did not want to consider. What if he did not? The transport ship broke through the purple clouds of Kethra Prime, and Danny Clark pressed his face against the small window like a child seeing snow for the first time. He was 28 years old, an electrical engineer from a small town in Ohio, and until 6 months ago, he had never imagined that aliens existed. Now he was landing on their home planet. The ship was filled with creatures from across the galaxy. Danny counted at least 15 different species sitting in the rows around him. There were tall insect-like beings with hard shells and clicking mandibles. There were reptilian warriors with scales that shifted colors when they moved. There were floating balls of gas contained in special suits. And there was Danny, wearing old cargo pants and a hoodie from his college days. He had volunteered for the Interstellar exchange program because it sounded interesting. The recruitment officer, a Kethran female with blue skin and 4 arms, had explained that Earth was a newly discovered world. Humans had only made contact with the galactic community 10 years ago. The exchange program was meant to build friendship between species. What the recruitment officer had not explained was the trial of resonance. The ship landed with a soft thump, and the passengers began to stand. Danny grabbed his small bag and followed the crowd toward the exit ramp. The air outside was warm and smelled like honey mixed with something metallic. The sky was a deep shade of violet, and 3 moons hung in the distance, each one a different size. A Kethran official stood at the bottom of the ramp. She was tall, maybe 7 feet, with skin that glowed faintly blue. She had 4 arms crossed over her chest and silver eyes that seemed to look through people rather than at them. Her name, Danny would learn later, was Lyris. "Welcome to Kethra Prime," Lyris announced. Her voice was calm, but carried across the landing area without effort. "You have been selected to participate in the trial of resonance. This is a great honor. Many species send their finest champions to attempt this trial. Very few succeed." Danny looked around at the other arrivals. The insect creature beside him was nearly 8 feet tall and had muscles that looked like they could crush metal. The reptilian warrior had scars across his face and eyes that burned with fierce determination. Even the gaseous entity somehow managed to look intense. Danny looked down at himself. He was 5'10", slightly out of shape, and had spent the journey reading a mystery novel on his tablet. "Excuse me," Danny said, raising his hand. Lyris turned her silver eyes toward him. The other candidates also turned to look at the small human who had dared to interrupt. "You are the human representative?" Lyris asked. "That is me," Danny replied. "I just have a quick question. What exactly is the trial of resonance? Nobody really explained it to me before I signed up." A ripple of strange sounds passed through the crowd. It took Danny a moment to realize that the aliens were laughing at him, or at least making whatever sounds their species used for laughter. Lyris did not laugh. Her expression remained completely neutral. "You volunteered without knowing what you volunteered for?" "The brochure was pretty vague," Danny admitted. "The trial of resonance is our most sacred tradition," Lyris explained. "At the heart of our palace sits an ancient crystal called the Heart of Kethra. It was created by our ancestors over 4,000 years ago. Those who can achieve resonance with the crystal prove themselves worthy of great honor. Those who fail are simply sent home." "Okay," Danny said slowly. "And how do you achieve resonance?" "You touch the crystal and attempt to synchronize your energy with its frequency. If the crystal accepts you, you achieve resonance. If it rejects you, you fail. Danny nodded. This sounded like some kind of spiritual test. How many attempts do we get? As many as you need, Lyra said. Most candidates require between 50 and 200 attempts before achieving resonance. Some never achieve it at all. In the entire history of the trial, only 3 beings have ever succeeded on their first attempt. All 3 were members of the Catherine royal family. What about your queen? Someone in the crowd asked. Danny turned to see a female from a species he did not recognize. She had green skin and large dark eyes. Queen Vectra the Eternal required 47 attempts, Lyris answered. There was pride in her voice. She achieved resonance faster than any non-royal in recorded history. She has ruled our empire for 300 years. Danny did some quick math in his head. If the queen had been ruling for 300 years and still looked young, these aliens must have very long lifespans. He added that to his mental list of things to research later. The group was led through the streets of the capital city toward the palace. Danny tried to take in everything he saw. The buildings were made of a white stone that seemed to glow from within. The streets were clean and wide, filled with Catherines going about their daily lives. They stopped to stare at the parade of alien candidates, pointing and whispering to each other. Danny noticed that the Catherines all had blue skin, though the shade varied from light sky blue to deep navy. They all had 4 arms and those strange silver eyes. Most wore flowing robes of various colors, though some wore what looked like military uniforms. The palace itself was enormous. It rose from the center of the city like a mountain made of crystal and stone. Light reflected off its surface in rainbow patterns, and Danny could see flying vehicles moving around its upper levels. Inside, the palace was even more impressive. The ceilings were so high that Danny could barely see them. Artwork covered the walls, depicting what he assumed were scenes from Catherine history. Everything was clean and bright and made Danny feel very small. A young Catherine male approached Danny as the group was being processed. He was shorter than most of his species, maybe only 6 feet tall, and his blue skin was a lighter shade than the others. He had a friendly face, or at least what Danny interpreted as friendly. "I am Torin," the young Catherine said. "I have been assigned as your mentor during your preparation for the trial." "Nice to meet you," Danny said. "I am Danny Clark. I know. You are the first human to ever participate in the trial of resonance. Many people are curious about your species." Torin paused. "I must be honest with you. No one expects you to succeed. Humans are considered a very young and primitive species." Danny was not offended. He knew that compared to civilizations that had existed for thousands of years, humanity was like a baby taking its first steps. "That is fair," he said. "I do not really know what I am doing here anyway." Torin tilted his head, a gesture that seemed to indicate confusion. "Then why did you come?" Danny thought about it. "I guess I was curious. When someone offers you a chance to visit an alien planet, you do not say no. That would be crazy." "Your reasoning is strange," Torin said. "Most candidates come here seeking glory. They train for years before being selected. They consider this the most important moment of their lives." "I thought it was a cultural exchange program," Danny said. "The brochure mentioned learning about other civilizations and sharing knowledge." Torin stared at him for a long moment. "You truly did not know about the trial?" "Not until about 10 minutes ago." The young Catherine made a sound that might have been a sigh. "This will be interesting. Come, I will show you to your quarters. You should rest tonight. Tomorrow, your preparation begins." As Danny followed Torin through the palace corridors, he could not shake the feeling that he had gotten himself into something much bigger than he had expected. A sacred trial that most people failed. A queen who had ruled for 300 years. champions from across the galaxy competing for honor. And here was Danny Clark, an engineer from Ohio who had just wanted to see some aliens. He wondered if it was too late to ask for a refund on his travel expenses. Queen Vexera stood from her throne and walked slowly down the steps toward Danny. Her advisors moved aside, giving her room. Her silver eyes never left his face, studying him the way a scientist might study a strange new specimen. "Do you understand what you have done?" she asked quietly. "I completed the trial," Danny said. "That was the goal, right? You completed the trial on your first attempt." Vexera stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could see the faint glow of energy beneath her blue skin. "In 4,000 years of recorded history, only 3 beings have ever achieved that. All 3 were members of my royal bloodline. All 3 went on to become rulers of this empire." Danny blinked. "I am sorry, what? The trial of resonance is not just a test of worthiness. It is the foundation of our succession. Those who achieve perfect resonance with the heart prove themselves worthy of the Kethran throne." Vexera paused to let that sink in. "By succeeding on your first attempt, you have demonstrated a level of compatibility that exceeds even my own. Technically, legally, you are now eligible to challenge me for rule of 17 star systems." The blood drained from Danny's face. "That was not in the brochure." "Apparently, your brochure left out several important details." Danny's mind raced. He had come to Kethra Prime because he was curious about aliens. He had volunteered for what he thought was a cultural exchange program. He had approached the trial as an interesting engineering puzzle. And now he was being told that he could potentially become the ruler of an interstellar empire. "Can I decline?" he asked. Vexera's eyes narrowed. "Decline? I do not want to rule an empire. I am an engineer. I fix things. I figure out how things work. I am not a leader. I am definitely not qualified to govern 17 star systems." The throne room fell completely silent. Every advisor, every guard, every servant stopped what they were doing and stared at the human who had just refused ultimate power. "No being in the history of our empire has ever declined such an honor," Vexera said slowly. "Then I am about to make history twice in one day." For a long moment, no one moved. Danny stood his ground, though his heart was pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. He had no idea if refusing was even allowed. Maybe they would throw him in prison. Maybe they would execute him for insulting their traditions. Maybe he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Then, Queen Vexera laughed out. It was not a cruel laugh or a mocking laugh. It was genuine surprise and amusement, and something else that Danny could not quite identify. The Queen's composed mask cracked, and for just a moment, she looked almost human. "You are the strangest being I have ever encountered," she said when she finished laughing. "I get that a lot." Vexera returned to her throne and sat down. She studied Danny for a while longer, tapping one of her 4 hands against the armrest thoughtfully. "Let me understand your position," she said finally. "You achieved perfect resonance with our most sacred artifact. You demonstrated compatibility that rivals royalty. You earned the right to challenge for control of one of the largest empires in the galaxy. And you want to refuse all of that because you prefer fixing machinery?" "Pretty much, yes." "Why?" Danny thought about the question seriously. He could see that Vexera was not asking out of anger. She was genuinely curious. "Because I know my limits," he said. "I am good at understanding how things work. Machines, systems, patterns. I can look at a problem and figure out the solution. But running an empire is not a technical problem. It is about politics and culture and history and relationships. I do not understand any of that. I would be terrible at it. Your people deserve a leader who knows what they are doing. And you think I know what I am doing? You have kept your empire running for 300 years. That seems pretty successful to me." Vexera was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had softened slightly. I spent 47 attempts achieving what you did in moments. My mother spent 62. My grandmother spent 103. Every member of my bloodline has struggled with the heart, proving their worth through persistence and determination. You walked in, touched the crystal like you were turning on a light switch, and succeeded immediately. I understand why that might be frustrating, Danny said carefully. Frustrating. Vexera laughed again, but this time there was an edge to it. You humiliated me in front of my entire empire. You proved that a random human from a primitive world could do what Ketharan royalty struggled with for generations. Every rival I've ever had will use this against me. Every enemy who questions my right to rule will point to you as evidence that the trial means nothing. Danny did not know what to say to that. He had not thought about the political consequences of his success. He had just been solving a puzzle. But, Vexera continued, you also offered to decline the throne. You said you do not want power. Either you are the most clever political operator I've ever met, or you are genuinely not interested in ruling. I am genuinely not interested, Danny confirmed. Then perhaps we can help each other. Vexera leaned forward slightly. You understand the heart of Kethera in ways that no one else ever has. You see it as a machine, as engineering. That perspective is valuable. If the trial can be analyzed and understood, perhaps it can also be improved. Perhaps more beings can achieve resonance. Perhaps my people can finally understand what our ancestors actually created. You want me to study the heart? I want you to explain it. To teach us what you learned. To help us understand our own technology. Vexera paused. In exchange, I will not force you to accept your rightful claim to the throne. You can return to your engineering and your puzzles. You can stay on Kethera, prime as a guest of the crown, or you can return to your own world. The choice is yours. Danny considered the offer. He thought about going home to Ohio, back to his small apartment and his regular job and his normal life. Then he thought about staying here on an alien world, studying the most advanced piece of technology he had ever seen. It was not a difficult choice. I would like to stay, he said. At least for a while. The heart is fascinating. I have so many questions about how it works. And if I can help your people understand it better, that seems like a worthwhile way to spend my time. Then we have an agreement. Vexera extended one of her hands, a gesture that Danny recognized from his briefings as a Ketharan form of contract. You will serve as my technical advisor on matters relating to the heart of Kethera. In return, you will have full access to our archives, our libraries, and the artifact itself. Danny reached out and shook her hand. Her skin was cool and smooth, and he could feel the faint hum of energy beneath the surface. I have to warn you, he said. I'm going to ask a lot of questions. Some of them might sound stupid. I have been warned. Vexera almost smiled. And Danny Clark, I suggest you never call yourself stupid again. Whatever you are, stupid is not the word. 3 months later, Danny had settled into his new role as the strangest advisor in the Ketharan court. He still wore cargo pants to formal ceremonies, which scandalized the traditional advisors but amused the younger members of the court. He still asked questions that the Ketharans found embarrassingly basic. He still treated ancient cosmic mysteries like engineering puzzles. And slowly, things began to change. Danny's work on the heart revealed that its original creators had designed it to be accessible to all species. The complex rituals and preparations that had developed over millennia were not requirements. They were traditions that had grown up around the trial because no one understood how it actually worked. The heart had never demanded spiritual purity. It had simply been waiting for someone to listen. When this discovery was announced, it caused uproar throughout the empire. Some people were angry that their sacred traditions had been built on misunderstanding. Others were excited that the trial might become accessible to beings who had previously been excluded. A few even suggested that Danny should be punished for revealing uncomfortable truths. Queen Vexera silenced the critics with a single speech. The heart of Kethera was built by our ancestors to test our ability to connect, to listen, to harmonize. For 4,000 years, we thought that meant proving our worth through struggle and suffering. Perhaps it simply meant learning to be open. Perhaps the human did not cheat our trial. Perhaps he showed us what the trial was always supposed to be. Danny watched the speech from the back of the hall, standing next to Torin. The young Catherine had become his friend over the past months, helping him navigate the complex politics of the court and translating the more confusing cultural traditions. "You changed everything," Torin said quietly. "Nothing will be the same after this." "I just figured out how a crystal worked," Danny replied. "Your people will figure out the rest." "Is that how you see yourself? Just a man who figured out a crystal?" Danny thought about it. "I am an engineer. I solve problems. I never wanted to be anything more than that. But sometimes solving one problem leads to solving others. You just have to be willing to ask the right questions." Above them, Queen Vexera finished her speech to thunderous applause. She caught Danny's eye from across the hall and gave him a small nod. It was not quite friendship. The Queen still had not entirely forgiven him for embarrassing her on her first attempt. But it was respect. It was acknowledgement, and for Danny Clark. The day of the trial arrived with great ceremony. Danny woke early and looked out his window at the crowds already gathering in the streets below. Thousands of Catherines were moving toward the arena, their blue skin catching the morning light, their voices creating a constant hum of excitement. Torin arrived at Danny's door, looking nervous. "Are you ready?" he asked. Danny was wearing his cleanest pair of cargo pants and a button-up shirt he had packed for formal occasions. It was not exactly royal attire, but it was the best he had. "I think so," he said. "How do I look?" Torin studied him for a moment. "Like a human? Perfect." They walked together through the palace corridors toward the arena. Other candidates were making the same journey, surrounded by their mentors and supporters. The insectoid Vrex moved in silence, his compound eyes focused straight ahead. Gorik the reptilian was surrounded by warriors from his home world, chanting battle songs in their harsh language. The arena itself was one of the largest structures Danny had ever seen. It was shaped like a bowl, with thousands of seats rising up on all sides. At the center stood the heart of Kethera. Danny stopped walking when he saw it. The crystal was enormous, maybe 30 feet tall and almost as wide. It rose from the floor like a frozen flame, its surface covered in facets that caught and reflected light in 1,000 directions. Deep inside, Danny could see pulses of energy moving through the structure, following the patterns he had studied in the library. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was the most advanced piece of technology Danny had ever seen. Impressive, is it not? Torin said quietly. "That is one word for it," Danny replied. The candidates were led to a waiting area near the edge of the arena floor. Danny counted 23 beings from at least 15 different species. Some were calm and composed. Others were visibly shaking with nerves. A few were praying to gods Danny had never heard of, the seats above them filled with spectators. Danny saw Catherines of all ages, from small children to ancient elders. He saw diplomats from other worlds wearing the formal dress of their species. He saw military officers and priests and merchants and scholars. Everyone wanted to witness the trial. Then silence fell over the arena. Queen Vexera descended from above, sitting on a floating throne of woven starlight. Her gown flowed around her like liquid silver, and her silver eyes surveyed the arena with calm authority. She was beautiful in a way that did not feel quite real, like a sculpture come to life. "Welcome to the trial of resonance," her voice echoed through the arena. amplified by technology Danny could not see. For 4,000 years, beings from across the galaxy have come to test themselves against the heart of Kethra. Today, 23 candidates will begin their journey toward resonance. Some will achieve it quickly. Some will need many attempts. Some will never achieve it at all. But all who try deserve our respect. The crowd cheered. Danny noticed that Vexera's eyes seemed to linger on him for just a moment. He was probably imagining it. The announcer, a tall Kethran with a booming voice, stepped forward. The candidates will approach the heart one at a time. Their attempt will be measured by how long they can maintain contact before the heart rejects them. Anything under 5 seconds is considered a failure. Anything over 30 seconds is considered promising. Anything over 1 minute is considered exceptional. The first candidate was called forward. It was a being Danny did not recognize, with gray skin and 6 legs. The creature approached the heart with obvious fear, its legs trembling as it moved. When it touched the crystal, there was a flash of light and it was thrown backward. The contact had lasted less than 2 seconds. Rejected, the announcer declared. The second candidate did slightly better. 5 seconds of contact before the heart cast him aside. The third managed 8 seconds. The fourth, 12. Danny watched carefully, trying to understand what was happening. Each candidate approached the crystal with intense concentration. They pressed their hands against the surface and seemed to strain with effort. Their bodies tense, their faces twisted with determination. And each time, the heart rejected them. They are fighting it, Danny realized. They are trying to force their energy into the crystal instead of matching its frequency. Vrex was called forward next. The insectoid champion moved with mechanical precision, his shell gleaming under the arena lights. He had trained for months. He had prepared his entire life for this moment. When he touched the heart, the crystal began to glow brighter than it had for any previous candidate. 10 seconds. 15 seconds. 20 seconds. The crowd began to murmur with excitement. 20 seconds was impressive for a first attempt. 25 seconds. 30 seconds. Then the heart flashed with blinding light, and Vrex was thrown backward across the arena floor. He landed hard, but immediately rose to his feet, his dignity intact despite the failure. 34 seconds, the announcer declared. An excellent first attempt. The crowd applauded politely. Vrex returned to the waiting area, clicking his mandibles in what might have been satisfaction or frustration. Gorak went next. The reptilian warrior roared as he approached the heart, his scales flashing with aggressive colors. He slammed both hands against the crystal as if he was attacking an enemy. The result was immediate. The heart flashed once, and Gorak flew through the air like he had been shot from a cannon. He crashed into the arena wall hard enough to crack the stone. 7 seconds, the announcer said. The heart does not respond well to aggression. Gorak limped back to the waiting area, growling curses in his native tongue. Danny noticed that he was bleeding from a cut on his head. The crystal had not been gentle with him. One by one, the candidates took their turns. Some lasted a few seconds. Some lasted half a minute. A female from a psychic species managed 41 seconds, the best result of the day, before the heart rejected her. She collapsed to the ground and had to be carried away by her attendants. Finally, only Danny remained. The arena fell quiet. Every eye turned toward the small human standing alone in the waiting area. Danny could feel the weight of their stares. They were curious. They were skeptical. Some of them were amused. The human representative will now attempt the trial of resonance, the announcer declared. First attempt. Danny walked toward the heart of Kethra. His footsteps echoed in the silence. He was aware of how small he looked compared to the massive crystal. He was aware that everyone expected him to fail. He was aware that Queen Vexera was watching from her floating throne. waiting to see him embarrass himself. He stopped in front of the heart and looked up at its shimmering surface. The energy pulses inside were moving in the pattern he had memorized. Every 47 seconds, the frequency shifted. He had been counting since the trial began. He knew exactly where the crystal was in its cycle. Danny took a deep breath. He did not try to empty his mind or find inner peace. He did not chant or pray or summon his willpower. Instead, he did what he had always done when working with complex systems. He listened. The heart had a rhythm, a pulse, a pattern. Danny closed his eyes and focused on that pattern, feeling it with senses he could not name. His own bioelectrical field, the natural energy that flowed through every living thing, began to adjust. Not by force, not by will, simply by matching what was already there. He opened his eyes and placed his palm flat. Against the crystal dot, the heart of Kethra was warm. Warmer than he expected. And inside its depths, Danny could feel something responding to his touch. Not rejecting, not fighting, recognizing. 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds. The crystal began to glow brighter. Not in the harsh, aggressive way it had glowed for other candidates. This was softer, warmer, like a lamp slowly being turned up. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. Danny shifted his hand slightly, following an instinct he did not fully understand. The glow increased. The energy pulses inside the crystal started moving faster, matching his own heartbeat. 30 seconds. The crowd was completely silent now. Even Queen Vexra had leaned forward on her throne, her silver eyes wide. 40 seconds. The heart of Kethra began to sing. The sound that came from the heart of Kethra was unlike anything Danny had ever heard. It was pure and clear, a single note that somehow contained 1,000 harmonies. It filled the arena and echoed off the walls and seemed to resonate in the bones of every being present. It was the sound of connection, the sound of resonance. 50 seconds. Danny kept his hand pressed against the crystal. His eyes were closed now, and a small smile had appeared on his face. He was not struggling. He was not straining. He looked peaceful, like someone listening to their favorite song. 60 seconds. The heart exploded with light. Every facet of the crystal blazed with a radiance that made the arena as bright as midday. The energy pulses inside were no longer moving in their normal pattern. They were swirling around Danny's hand, drawn to him like water flowing toward a drain. The entire structure seemed to be alive in a way it had never been before. Gasps rose from the crowd. Some beings covered their eyes against the brightness. Others leaned forward, trying to see what was happening. No one spoke. No one moved. Everyone understood that they were witnessing something that had not happened in centuries. 90 seconds. 2 minutes. The singing of the heart grew louder and more complex. New harmonies joined the original note, loading into a symphony that made Danny's heart ache with its beauty. He could feel the crystal not just accepting him but welcoming him, opening its ancient pathways to him like a flower opening to the sun. 3 minutes. 4 minutes. Queen Vexra rose from her throne. Her face, usually so composed and regal, showed open shock. Her 4 hands gripped the armrests of her throne so tightly that her blue knuckles turned white. In 300 years of rule, she had never seen anything like this. 5 minutes. Danny opened his eyes. They reflected the crystal's light like mirrors, glowing with an inner radiance that was not quite human. He looked at the heart one more time, nodded slightly as if in thanks, and then gently removed his hand from its surface. The light faded slowly, like a sunset. The singing continued for a few moments more, then gradually quieted until only silence remained. The heart of Kethra stood in the center of the arena, its energy pulses moving in a new pattern that had not been recorded in any of the ancient texts. Danny stepped back and blinked a few times. His eyes returned to normal. He looked around at the thousands of beings staring at him and cleared his throat awkwardly. "Is that it?" he asked. "Did I do it right?" No one answered. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Danny started to wonder if he had done something wrong. Maybe he had broken their sacred crystal. Maybe they were all about to attack him. Maybe he should not have treated a 4,000-year-old artifact like a radio to tune. Then Torrin's voice rose from somewhere in the crowd. The young Catherine sounded like he might faint. He achieved resonance. On his first attempt, the arena exploded into chaos. Catherines were shouting at each other, some in joy and some in disbelief. Candidates who had just failed were staring at Danny with expressions ranging from admiration to pure hatred. Gorak the reptilian looked like he wanted to tear Danny apart with his claws. Rex the insectoid just stood perfectly still, his compound eyes fixed on the human who had done the impossible. The announcer was trying to restore order, but his voice was drowned out by the noise. Guards were moving through the crowd, trying to keep people from rushing onto the arena floor. Several beings had already fainted from shock. Danny stood alone in the middle of it all, still not entirely sure what had just happened. He noticed Queen Vexera staring at him from her throne. Her expression was unreadable, but something in her silver eyes made Danny uncomfortable. It was not anger exactly. It was something deeper and more complicated. It was the look of someone whose entire understanding of the universe had just been challenged. The queen raised one of her hands, and instantly the arena fell silent. Whatever chaos had been unfolding stopped immediately. Every being turned to look at their ruler. "Bring him to the throne room," Vexera commanded. Her voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. Now, guards appeared on either side of Danny and gestured for him to follow them. He had no choice but to obey. As he walked toward the palace, he could feel thousands of eyes on his back. He could hear whispers following him like a wave. "First attempt," someone was saying. "A human succeeded on his first attempt. Impossible. There must be some mistake." The heart sang for him. The heart has not sung in 200 years. What kind of creature is he? Danny did not have answers to any of those questions. He was just an engineer from Ohio who had wanted to see some aliens. Somehow, he had stumbled into the most significant moment in Catherine history in centuries. The throne room was vast and cold. Crystalline pillars rose from the floor to a ceiling so high it was lost in shadow. Light filtered through windows of colored glass, casting rainbow patterns across the polished floor. At the far end of the room, on a throne of starlight and ancient power, sat Queen Vexera the Eternal. She had arrived before Danny, using some form of transportation he had not seen. Now she waited for him, surrounded by her advisors and guards. Her 4 arms were folded across her chest, and her silver eyes tracked Danny's every step as he approached. He stopped at what he hoped was an appropriate distance and tried to remember if there was some kind of bow or greeting he was supposed to offer. Nobody had taught him court etiquette. Nobody had expected him to need it. So, Queen Vexera said finally, "You are the human who just embarrassed 4,000 years of tradition." Danny winced. "I did not mean to embarrass anyone. I just tried to match the frequency and explain." The word was a command, not a request. Danny took a deep breath. The heart of Cathra operates on resonance frequencies. Most candidates fail because they try to force their energy into the crystal, fighting against its natural pattern. But the crystal is not looking for strength or willpower. It is looking for compatibility. For matching, continue. I spent a few weeks studying the diagrams in your library. The energy pathways inside the heart follow a 47-second cycle. If you enter the cycle at the right moment and let your bioelectrical field follow the pattern instead of fighting it, the crystal accepts you. It is like tuning a radio to the right station. You are not forcing the signal. You are just finding it. Queen Vexera stared at him. Her advisors exchanged nervous glances. "You treated the heart of Kethera," she said slowly, "like a piece of machinery?" "Because functionally, that is what it is," Danny replied. "I mean no disrespect. Your ancestors created something incredible. The engineering is beyond anything my species has ever achieved. But the underlying principles are still physics. Energy and frequency and resonance. These are not mystical concepts. They are just science." One of the advisors stepped forward. "Your eternity, this is offensive. The heart is a sacred artifact blessed by our ancestors. To reduce it to mere machinery is blasphemy, is it?" Vexera asked quietly. "He succeeded where millions have failed. Perhaps he understands something we do not." She turned her attention back to Danny. "You said you spent a few weeks studying. Other candidates train for years, decades. Some spend their entire lives preparing for the trial. How could you possibly learn what they could not?" Danny shrugged. "I am an engineer. We are good at figuring out how things work. It is what we do. That is not an answer." "I know. I am still figuring it out myself." Danny paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I think maybe the problem is that your people have been approaching the trial the same way for so long that nobody thought to try something different. You train for spiritual purity and mental strength because that is what the ancient texts say. But maybe the ancient texts were wrong. Or maybe they were right. The people misunderstood what they meant." Vexera leaned forward on her throne. "And what do you think they meant?" "I think resonance is not about worthiness. It is about openness. The candidates who fail are trying too hard. They are pushing their energy at the crystal instead of listening to it. The ones who succeed eventually are the ones who accidentally learn to relax and follow the pattern. It just takes most people a very long time to figure that out." The throne room was silent, except for the soft hum of the floating lights above. Danny looked at the Queen and saw something unexpected in her expression. Behind the anger and the pride and the injured dignity, there was curiosity. There was interest. There was the beginning of something that might eventually become respect. It was not much. But it was a start.